And let me here. Here
Yes.
we go. All right, very good.
Perfect.
Well, I'm with Pacific Justice Institute. I've been the chief counsel with them for well over 20 years, and it's been a good run. I've been an attorney about 30 years, and I delighted to be with you. I don't want to spend too much time about myself. I want to get into the substance. So let me just introduce the organization first, in case you haven't heard of us. Even though our name is Pacific, we're actually coast to coast. From We have an office in Miami, we have one in Honolulu, in Boston, Seattle. So we're just all over the place. Um, and let me see if I could change. I'm having There we go. Here's our mission statement. So we're a nonprofit organization. We handle mostly most of what we do. If it was this is a bit if you would call it a business, our business is primarily in the courts and legal efforts, and we defend religious freedom, parental rights, pro-life issues, that sort of thing. And we do this on a completely pro bono basis, without charging people. And I and let's see if this will. I'm in a little trouble with my. There it is. Um, We've we actually have quite a bit, over 100 active cases. At one time, we had well over 200. We actually, in religious discrimination cases, we had more than the EEOC in court. And so they have a budget of just under $500 million. We do this for about 1% of that. So I think we get do well for that. We've got 33 attorneys in 21 states, including Florida. I'll just give you a postage stamp of some of the things that we do. Then I'm going to go into a couple of cases more in depth, so you get a feel for our work. For parental rights, there was a matter we call it in Ray Jane Doe. Of course, that's it's a pseudonym. Teenage girl tragically attempted suicide. She go she goes to a psychiatric evaluation, and the psychiatrist says, "So what's the problem?" She said, "The problem is mom doesn't let me wear the clothes I want." That's nothing unusual for a teenage girl and mom. Uh, Mom also won't use the pronouns that I prefer. Mom keeps calling me her daughter, not her son, and won't use the name that I've now chosen to give her. So, because the mother would not accept the daughter's gender identity, the psychiatrist refers the matter to social services for abuse and neglect of the parent. So, the daughter is taken away, and with the brilliant minds of social service, because this girl says she's a boy, they put her in a foster home with troubled teenage boys. And so, guess what happened to her? So that was unfortunate. We came in in court to assist the mother. In a We were also help mentioned a church law. We represent a lot of religious institutions. We've just filed earlier this month in the Supreme Court, the case in coming out of the San Diego area. There was a preschool that unfortunately got shut down during the pandemic. There was a requirement in California that that in these preschools they had to mask the children. When the children would take the masks and throw them on the ground, and mom and dad told teachers, "Don't put a mask on my kid," and the school could not assuage both the parents and the state, so the state shut them down, revoked their license. So we filed a lawsuit in federal court. The church says, "You know what? We want to get out of this licensing of preschool things." You say, why in the world would a preschool not want to be licensed by the state? Well, the answer is a couple of things. One is churches have been helping the weak, the less fortunate, and children for 2,000 years without help from the state of California. Done that just fine. And the other thing was the churches, in order to be licensed, have to give up certain core constitutional rights, meaning they warrantless searches, Miranda warnings, meaning if a police, I'm sure you've heard of that. If a police officer stops you, you have the right to remain silent. It's in the Fifth Amendment. But importantly, the church had to waive some of its First Amendment rights. They had to allow the state requires the church to give parents an opt-out of religious services and activities. Well, that's what churches do, is spiritual formation of children. So they don't want to do that. And also, they were required to put up a notice that said that the parents could bring in the outside spiritual advisor of their choice. So that really violates the principles, the legal principles of separation of church and state, where a churches need to be able on their own campuses to uh, fully engage in their authority to provide spiritual um, help to people, and without the interference of the state. So that's what they've done. We also help employees that have religious um, issues. There was during the pandemic, and there were certain people who had religious convictions that would not allow them to be vaccinated. Now, whatever you think about vaccination, that's everybody has their own opinions and sensibilities. The problem was coercion against people's religious convictions. And so a railroad in the San Francisco area, a commuter railroad, fired about 200 people of its employees for not being vaccinated, and we represented 35 of them uh, who were um, uh, who were fired, and ended up going to trial. Most of them settled, went but had to go to trial with six of them, and thank thank God we got a favorable jury verdict, $7.8 million, and which was happened to be the largest religious discrimination verdict in California in the 2024. So that was a good victory. Another matter, we also help with free speech. There was a woman who went to a open festival on a in a public park, and there was a booth where they were having a drag queen sh sh show, and there were minors there, and so she just started a conversation with some people in a booth, and they got upset. Uh, Kind of like the Charlie Kirk thing, but very calm lady. But they had the police come and get her license plate number, and send a squad car out to her home and harass her for simply engaging in First Amendment speech in a calm, peaceful way in a public forum. And so we had to take that case. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of a few things we do. If my slide will advance, let me try it again. Oh, it's, let me try. Let me try to stop, and let me try to redo it if I can. Uh, and and there we go. There we go. Um, this is a case that we just finished. Comes out of Texas, Johnson versus Marlin Independent School District. A superintendent of the school district was engaging in some unethical conduct. He was essentially bullying parents and students, unilaterally changing grades, changing class rank. He was delaying graduation, that sort of thing. And so parents obviously were not happy about that. That was causing a lot of stress in some of these homes. Because of this, some students whose school ranking was changed, lost out on college scholarships. So it was not something you could just turn a blind eye to. Parents felt they had to go to bat for that. So they went and they filed a complaint with the state agency in Texas, a state educational agency. And they also spoke out about this conduct during public school meetings during the public comment section. They were utilizing their First Amendment rights, free speech, and to petition their government for redress of grievances. That's what you do at school board meetings. And then they also went through a process of filing a grievance with the school. Unfortunately, the subject of that grievance was the superintendent, and the investigator and the decision maker was, alas, the superintendent. So he found himself not in violation of anything, and so let's just move along. Well, do you remember back during the Biden administration, a lot of parents across the country were there was a grassroots effort to go to school board meetings and address problems they saw in their schools. And the Department of Justice unfortunately started going after parents. The National School Boards Association began to label these parents as domestic terrorists. And I don't know if you recall that, but we've had to help parents in these types of things. And so, in any event, there was that sort of thing happening across the country, and in Texas, uh, some of these school boards that wanted to silence parents were getting lawyered up, and so they figured, how can we stop these parents? Not all the Department of Justice wasn't always capable of doing that, and so what they would do, they devised a plan, and that was uh, the they would instruct they went and these had their lawyers go and give presentations to other lawyers on how to handle parents, and they what they said the way to deal with quotes big mad parents is to issue them a criminal trespass warning and then barring them from entry onto district property. So in other words, a parent complains, they're criminally trespassed, and they can't even enter the campus of their own child's. Some being not even being threatened that they can't go to their own child's graduation because they've been criminally trespassed. So here, when parents at this school started speaking at public meetings, the superintendent, following this sort of mode of operation, had the police come and remove the parents and issue them a criminal trespass warning. Then the school district hired attorneys and sent cease and desist letters to the parents and threatened to uh, sue them. And so, well, the parents fortunately went to us and decided they're gonna act first. And so, a lawsuit was filed in federal court in Texas, and actually a week ago, yesterday, we got a jury verdict. The jury found for the parents and awarded the parents and the students $7.5 million dollars, and we're getting lots of calls on that from parents and who are being criminally trespassed, and their First Amendment rights are being violated. And so we hope that this is sending a message to schools that the Constitution means things, and you're not immune to it, even though You're in a school district. Let's see if I could get to the next one. Oh, there we go. Oh, this is another case had during the pandemic. There were a lot. I don't know what it was like where you were at, but in California, it was particularly bad. Other states were very bad. New York City. When I say bad, I mean in terms of the restrictions on citizens. And churches were subject in California, certain counties to warrantless searches. If there would be they were these health officials were given really broad unconstitutional powers to close houses of worship. Um, Despite being subject when they would go to search a church, uh, if you violated these health orders, it was a criminal offense. But despite that, they were subject to criminal penalties and no Miranda warnings. And so what you say, of course, could have been used against you, and you weren't warned about that. Officials could arrest folks without a warrant. The accused were subject not just to criminal, but to civil and administrative enforcement. And the administrative enforcement was worse, far worse than the criminal enforcement. I was telling when I was representing lots and lots of ministers across the country, uh, uh, particularly California, I said, well, it's only $1,000 fine, and if you're convicted and potentially 6 months in prison and in jail, and every pastor I spoke to thought that would have been the greatest honor of their life to go to jail because they had decided to open church on Sunday. But these administrative fines were far worse than the criminal. In this in a in the You've heard of the Silicon Valley where they have all the tech giants in California. Well, that was the worst place in the country. The most restrictive is more restrictive than New York City. And they would fine churches $2,500 a day for the first offense, and the second offense was $5,000 per day, including days when the churches were not meeting. So I'm old enough to remember they had gas. Remember, yeah, they had gas pumps, and it would ding every time you'd have a gallon. Well, every day there would be a $5,000 fine with these churches. Uh, and there was no right to a jury trial. You didn't. Accusations were anonymous, so you couldn't face your accuser. And then the rules of evidence were waived so that the government would more easily be able to prove its case. And so it was it was a really difficult time, and it really truly was a suspension of the Constitution. Let's see if I can get this. Let me try this one more time. Go to the next slide. Oops. Oh, here we are. Um, there we go. You see this lady in the corner. She was the attorney who was really running this police apparatus in that state. And this is what she told the New York Times. She says, I don't feel comfortable telling people that their constitutional rights don't really matter right now, but I've had to. Right now, we're putting parts of the Constitution on hold. We really are. Freedom of assembly, right to practice religion. So when I say the Constitution was put on hold and suspended, that's not me making that up. That's not hyperbole. That is what the government was saying. And so there were five churches whose sanctuaries had been empty for a year, and they contacted me and asked if I would try to represent them to open up again. And I said I would, but I told them it's a long shot because we'd been filing all sorts of lawsuits. They were being lost one after the other all across the country. Courts were not ruling in favor of churches. So they said, what would that look like? And I said, well, I'm going to file what's called a request for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction. Sort of, it's a legal instrument to try to stop the train. And they said, what will happen? I said, well, the trial court is going to deny that. And then they said, what do we do next? And I said, well, I'll file an emergency request for a stay in the appellate court, and in that part of the country was happened to be the Ninth Circuit. And they said, what will happen? I said, well, I think they're going to deny that as well. And they said, what's after that? The Supreme Court? And I said, yeah, that's the last stop on the train. And they said, what are our chances? I said, well, to get a case heard in the Supreme Court, the chances are 1%. That's the batting average. And so they thought they're apparently people of faith, and they had more faith than I did. And so they thought 1% chance is better than no percent. So they said, go ahead and file the lawsuit. So I filed it, and it happened just like I said. The trial court denied the request for a preliminary injunction. The Ninth Circuit denied a stay, the emergency stay. And I filed, they denied it on a Friday evening. I it was happened to be a 3-day weekend, so I worked that 3-day weekend into the night and filed on Tuesday in the Supreme Court. And the it's sort of the same. It's this app they call it an application for writ of injunction, and it's the same type of instrument when you have, say, a capital case and they're trying to stop stop a governor from or a state from executing someone. So it's the same kind of thing. So it happens pretty fast. So I filed it on Tuesday. The court asked the other side to file an opposition, and in Thursday morning, I filed my final reply brief, and I got a strange call from the on Thursday afternoon from a Supreme Court reporter from CNN wanting to know about the case, and I told her, but I when I hung up, I thought that was strange because that you only get a 1% chance of winning. But on Friday evening, it would have been 9 o'clock on the East Coast. I got an email order from the court that they were going to reverse all of the lower courts, and so I quickly emailed that to all of the ministers of these churches and told them on Sunday you could have church. So that's what happened to that. So that is basically what Pacific Justice Institute does. That's the kind of work we do. We do some in legislatures supporting and opposing bills. Um, if you let me see if I could do this again. Oh, and if we are like sort of like Scarlett O'Hara, where we depend on the kindness of strangers. So if you're ever interested in donating to us, this is where your money goes. About 80% or so goes to pro bono representation, free representation for people. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I see some hands already going up. And if you're not comfortable speaking, you can always put something in the chat. But before, I'm actually very curious about how the organization was founded. What happened to move this forward?
So our president was in 1997 uh, was started the organization. I think he basically started it out of the trunk of his car and would uh, do the litigation himself and do speaking engagements and radio types of things. And it just gradually built. I came in on 2004, and we had not taken any litigation in-house. We were doing it all with volunteers, and then we started doing it in-house. And so it's grown to, like I said, we've had over 200 cases in a year ongoing. And so that's how
Yeah,
it, that's a
amazing.
short version of it.
All right, I'm going to Christopher Costa, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Of course. I just wanted to ask for the organization. First of all, my name is Christopher Costa. It is such an honor to be here. And I am a constitutionalist. So I have it by my side the whole time. I'm currently going to school to become a lawyer. So I'm fascinated by law and stuff like that. Uh, there is a judge in New York that she's notorious for committing judicial misconduct and stuff like that. What would your organization be able to do in regards to that? Like she has openly said on the record that some people are too poor to plan for trips with their kids. She has denied constitutional rights for a disabled person. Um, she has threatened disabled veterans with arrest for not following what she says, which was completely unconstitutional and against the law. What would your company be able to do in a situation like that?
So
So
the
the
authority to deal with rogue judges is actually not a part of the private sector, so we couldn't do anything. What could be done is the evidence brought to uh, the legislature, the Senate, and the Senate under the Constitution has power to impeach a judge, and so that's the only thing the private sector can do is get evidence together and give it to the Senate.
and how would I recommend people to find in your company to be represented by you?
So go to oh, I should have put that on the I'll share my screen with the information, probably be easier that way. Here's our contact information, and you could scan that QR code if that's something that you do, and just or you could just go to info@pji if you want to email us, and we process those and get that over to people. So
And
I'll
I will
leave
send around the information via email
that.
following the meeting. So,
So I'll leave this up for another 15 seconds and but go ahead and next question.
Alyssa, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. And I'm sorry, I couldn't figure it out. I'm doing it from my phone, so that's why I couldn't put my name before. But my name's Alicia, spelled like Alyssa. I'm a registered nurse here in Connecticut, and we went through a lot during COVID. And so my question is not really medical, well, sort of it is. We have a person here that had reached out to my husband and I because we just started getting into the political realm about his daughter was taken from him,
Mhm.
similarly the first case that you discussed
Yes.
back in 2019. And DCF was weaponized to take her from him. He hasn't seen her since. He does talk to her on the phone, though. She did move out of state, but she was only 14 when this happened in 2019, with the same thing that you had said, a neglect. Now, I know his case is over now because they removed her. They actually gave her to a homosexual couple, a male homosexual couple in foster care, and started giving her puberty blockers against he didn't know. And a lot of our laws here in Connecticut are horrific. I mean, I just started digging into some of this and getting involved as much as I could. So is there anything for him at this point that he can do to get justice for what they did to him, or not really.
Um, so once the case, usually once the case it goes through the family or dependency courts, you have to file an appeal and try that, and that's where one has to go. And when that time lapses, it gets very difficult, if nigh impossible, to get justice. I mean, in other words, courts, even though they seem slow, they actually run on a clock. And once your time expires, it's like a football game or a basketball game. Once that final buzzer goes off, or then there's not much that can be done. So they have to. I would suggest for those, if you're interested in engaging in this sort of issue, is have parents contact us while they're still, their children are in custody or threatening to be taken from them. And we
Thank
can.
you. And then the last question I have is there's an organization called Do No Harm.
Mhm,
Um, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
mhm,
they were trying to do the Chloe Cole Act. Is
mhm.
you work alongside of organizations like that too? And
Yeah. Chloe I met her. She was in our office filming something, and she's a brave gal. And you got to hand it to her. So we are working with uh, organizations, individuals and organizations, on this issue. It is a really big issue. Unfortunately, it, you know, it used to be, when I would tell people about this first case, this in Ray Jane Doe, people think, well, that's kind of like a freak show. That doesn't really happen. It's too bad that happened to someone, but unfortunately, that is very common. Schools are indeed grooming children in this area, and the Supreme Court just ruled on a case where they were grooming kids in kindergarten. So it is a problem.
well, thank you so much for the work that you do, and I'm definitely gonna spread the news about about your law firm because there is a lot of cases here in Connecticut that we're learning more and more about, and across the country too, that are reaching out to my husband and I. So I
Mhm,
appreciate it much. Thank you for your time.
mhm.
Kevin, I was last year I was consulting with the Leadership Institute as well. And I know that they were working closely with Riley Gaines and the issue of, boys and girls sports and in locker rooms. Um, can you tell us if you've been dealing with cases such as that?
Yes, we just filed. Oh, not just in the last, I'd say 6 months, we filed at least two briefs in the Supreme Court on cases. The Supreme Court just heard a case involving laws passed in Idaho and in West Virginia. The argument was maybe 2 weeks ago, and uh, those two states passed laws essentially to keep boys on boys teams and girls on girls teams. And the conventional wisdom is the Supreme Court is going to uphold this. The state of Idaho, that their law, we actually testified when it was going through their state legislature. So we have been involved in this issue.
Thank you. That's I in all my communications I've been telling our members, we're very blessed to have an organization such as this that during a time where I'm sure these issues have happened as your founders saw the need in the 90s, but really snowballed in recent years. And I wasn't familiar with your organization until I reached out to Zachary and your team, and anything that we can do to further promote what you're doing and put out stories, we will absolutely be doing that. Um, does anyone else? Oh, Miguel, I see you have a question.
Hi, how's it going, guys? So I have a question for Kevin. I know there was a recent Supreme Court argument with the whole transgender athlete ban.
Mhm.
And it was funny seeing the arguments between the ACLU lawyer and Alito and all these guys. Pretty much the ACLU not having a clear definition to what sex and gender and these kind of terms are. So based, and I know we have a lot of differences between the states. So seeing this case how it is, do you think we'll finally get a clear definition from the Supreme Court on what sex and gender is? And will that affect individual state laws that have something completely different than what we believe in?
That's a good question. So there you have to think in what they call federalism, where you have the states and then you have the federal government, and they have their own sets of laws. The the federal government's law is called Title IX, and that does define, well, it says boys and girls, or male and female, men and women. Uh, but that law was written in the 1960s. In the 1960s, these terms of this gender fluidity and transgenderism was not in place. And so what the lawmakers intended by sex is what you and I think of biological sex, just because when the law was passed. So the national situation, I think, is much clearer. When states have the right to define things the way they want to define it. And so right now, I think it's 26 states have defined sex, particularly with regards to boys and girls in athletics and the like. They've defined it in I would call it an orthodox way, where boys are boys and girls are girls. Um, but you have other states, blue states, if I could just say it, that will define it much differently. And I've got a case right now, in the state of Washington, where um, we have a women's spa, and in that it's a Korean women's spa. I don't know if anyone's been to one, but the massages, what they call exfoliation, and the whirlpools and those things. Those are done in a state of nature. The women are nude. Well, of course, a guy who says he's a girl wants to use it, and so he files a complaint with the Human Rights Commission in Washington, and of course they rule for this transgender woman, this man, and so we filed a lawsuit in a federal court, challenging that law. So I wish I had a simpler answer but what the Supreme Court will probably do is say, states, you can define sex as a state of biology if you so choose. But they're probably going to leave the door open for states like Washington to do something else.
I imagine that the spa would have to probably go out of business after that, which is sad that it's affecting businesses as well.
Yeah, they've had a couple of instances where a man has snuck in and tried to, claiming they're a woman or something. They weren't caught right away. And of course, women, they have all of their plumbing there, and women feel rage and shame, and they demand their money back, and they never come back again. So if they
Mhm.
were, it would be a bankruptcy for that spa. So we're fighting for
Mhm.
them.
Miguel, you have another question?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we see the Supreme Court go the route that you just said that says, you can define these terms even though they're defined a certain way under Title IX, wouldn't that make what you guys do and what other organizations like yours do, wouldn't that make it harder because then the Supreme Court would essentially be saying your definite, like you state Washington or California, your definitions of this is therefore legal or constitutional?
So there's a couple of things. One, let me give one category of education, sports and education. Uh, our position is, and I think the Supreme Court would agree, that federal law trumps or is more powerful than state law. And so, if there is a conflicting state law, so let's say you have a soccer team, and there's only so many players that could be on the soccer team, and it's in some schools it's competitive, and not everybody makes the team, right? And so if a boy makes the girls' team, another girl can't play. She's out. And so we would argue that the federal law, her rights under federal law, override state law. Um, with the spa, they have something called the public accommodations laws, so that anybody could come into a business and they can't be rejected service. Our position is twofold. One is that these people are the business owners. These Korean owners are Christians. They believe that men and women should not be uh, in a state of undress in each other's presence unless they're married to each other. That's their views. And so we have a what's called free exercise of religion claim, and the other claim is called association or associational privacy. You have a Republican, National Republican Hispanic Assembly. It's closed. I don't think you probably let Democrats in. Um, you have the right to have your own club. And so that's part of our argument is this some businesses are like a club, especially when you have to go in there and take your clothes off in front of other people. They want to have a sense of privacy. So that's how we're challenging that.
Um, Kevin, one more question from me. We have about 9 minutes left. But changing the subject back to or not back to, but towards immigration, what's happening in the current atmosphere in the
Mhm.
US. There's a misnomer that as immigrants, that the Hispanic population would support an open border, and this is simply untrue because we are, well, a whole nation of immigrants that came over to the US under the appropriate means, and many of which have had to claim asylum. Have you been addressing any cases in that area?
Right. Just for full disclosure, my wife is an immigrant. You probably, if you wanted to look her up, she's a writer and writes for The Stream and Guardian and Christian Nation. Um, but she, like you, has a very strong um, viewpoint on immigration. It needs to be lawful, and you certainly don't want criminals and lunatics coming in unvetted coming into your country. Um, so yeah, that. But to what we do specifically, our uh, um, area of immigration law is very narrow. We deal with religious asylum, people from all over the world who are being horrifically tortured and kidnapped and make it to this country. They usually make it to this country through, say, a visa, a lawful visa, and then once they're here lawfully, temporarily, like a tourist visa, or business visa, then they claim religious asylum, and they go through a process. And we vet these cases very well. Um, but they are tragedies. I've had, a lady in my came to my office, and with her 16-year-old son, her husband was kidnapped, and he was a pastor, I think a youth pastor in a country, and was kidnapped, and along with two other people, right in Sunday, two men came right into the church, pulled him out, held the congregation at bay with machine guns, and they were tortured and killed. And so, you know, that's anyway, that's the long story, but that's our limitation on immigration as an organization.
Do you also deal with political asylum? My parents are Cuban, and we have lots of members that are Venezuelan, and um,
Mhm. Yeah, we do not, we haven't taken that on, because our organization is typically deals with the First Amendment type issues, religion, speech, that sort of thing. So so far we have not taken. Well, I'm sorry, I take that back. We have had some hybrid cases where there's religious persecution and political persecution. So we've had both.
mm-hmm,
That's not our emphasis, not our area of expertise.
mm-hmm. It's interesting. Yeah, as I've been speaking around the state and nationally, I have some non-Hispanics that uh, when they find out my position with the RNHA, um, and their leanings are a little bit left, they immediately start telling me stories about some unfortunate person who had already years ago had a warrant, and were basically here illegally for decades. And the current administrations at the time were not actively looking for um, to deport them, but they did have a deportation and they were convicted of a crime.
Mhm.
And but because they had been here for 20 or 30 years and had been lawful for the majority of that time and were paying taxes, that, you know, they wanted our support. And I feel it's very difficult because it's sad and unfortunate, but you know, basically and I well, some of my members might disagree, but this is someone who's been here and had a warrant for deportation that has basically been on the run. I don't know if there's ever going to be a solution for this, um, but hopefully we're going to have some new immigration laws in the future and be able to sort this all out.
Yeah, I would just say, um, and this is outside of our scope, so I'm not speaking for the organization, but I could tell you that there has not been a political will among, for different reasons, among the Democrats and the Republicans to solve have amend the immigration laws and come up with something reasonable. And of course, in the Trump administration, you probably all know this. There is a divide. President Trump wants to narrowly focus on, criminals and miscreants and get them out. There's other factions within the Trump administration that want to get rid of all illegal immigrants, and so there's the fight. That's why we have a
Yeah.
political process to figure it out.
Yes. I know that Congressman Maria Salazar has a new immigration bill that she's sponsoring. So we'll have to see what happens with that. We'll follow that closely. We have 2 minutes left. If you want to put up your slide with your contact information again. And I just want to thank everyone for for attending and asking your question. I'm sorry there was an error and cancellation notice went out from the calendar, but we have recorded the meeting and we'll upload it to the YouTube and we'll have it available for anyone who missed the call. And of course, we will forward your contact information, Kevin. And for those of you who have not yet visited the RNHA website, I invite you to go to rnha.org, look at our mission and objectives and our history, and also visit rnhaflorida.org. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. My email is very easy, barbara@rnhaflorida.org. And but if you received my email and information, you probably have my contact information. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Kevin, again for speaking to us and taking the time. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone.